dealing with some changes on the offensive line, changes in his receiving core, no Rob Gronkowski, and right now we're clearly keeping an eye on the receiving core for the Bucs. Chris Godwin not expected to play in Week 2. Mike Evans missed practice on Thursday. But I think even if Evans plays, it's going to be a little bit tough for Brady against a great Saints defense that has given him fits over his 4 games in Tampa Bay, taking on New Orleans. 2 decent games, but 2 absolute miserable ones, and I fear that this could be another miserable one. It's not an outright sit Tom Brady because it's very hard to do. I don't think a lot of people are going to go start Carson Wentz, and I wouldn't recommend doing that. But you got to lower expectations for him because this is a tough matchup for a guy that has just a bad history in this matchup. So it's easy to get away from him if Evans doesn't play. I don't think anybody's going to trust him and start him. Then you would probably go consider Carson Wentz. But if he does have Evans at least out there, Julio Jones out there, Russell Gage out there, are you guys comfortable starting Brady in this matchup?
Not really, no. I think Evans will be less than 100%. Julio will be Julio. He's going to be less than 100%. He didn't practice on Thursday. Maybe they'll say that was just a veteran rest day, and then you'll feel better about Julio. And it does sound like Russell Gage will be back. But I will start Carson Wentz because I think he will get more passing yardage and potentially more touchdowns than Tom Brady. I'm not saying that Carson Wentz is a Hall of Famer like Tom Brady is or anything like that, but his matchup against Detroit, way better than the matchup that Brady has against a defense that knows him and that is going to collapse the pocket on him, especially with that offensive line not being as strong as it was in the past. And in the past, when it was strong, they were getting to him. Now they're going to really be able to get to him, and I'm officially nervous.
I don't feel comfortable. I'm not sitting Tom Brady as long as Mike Evans plays, just because there's not anybody I would sit him for. Now, there are guys, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, who were drafted late enough that I suppose they could be your backup quarterback. Would 100% start those guys. I'm not starting Carson Wentz over Tom Brady. I just can't do it.
Yeah, and look, we do this a lot. Like you have Najee Harris lower than most people are going to consider in terms of benching or starting or sitting him. You don't want to make a transaction, too. It's hard to carry 2 quarterbacks if you don't have the roster space to do it. So sometimes you just got to hope that the greatest of all time can overcome some situations, and hopefully does. I just don't expect him to have a huge game taking on this Bucs defense. He's a bust alert in the start-sit column that you can read on CBSSports.com. All right, some other sits for me. I'm a little bit concerned about the Bears, understandably so. David Montgomery drafted to be a starter. Darnell Mooney drafted to be a number 3 receiver. They both did not look good in Week 1. Now, you could say it was the weather. Understand that's a perfectly good argument. But Montgomery, there are some signs. Bad offensive line. Not really going to separate himself, I think, at least, from Khalil Herbert. And this defense, I think that the Packers are going to throw at him, while they did not play great against Minnesota, will be angry and much more motivated playing at home against this Bears defense. So Montgomery, as you see, we don't really love him across the board. I know, Heath, you're the high guy on him, but I don't think you feel comfortable about it, right? Just knowing the way they looked in Week 1 and what Herbert showed you.
No, I feel better about him than I do Darnell Mooney, and he was more active in the passing game than Darnell Mooney was in Week 1. I do think that his role in the passing game in a full PPR league, I don't like him near as much in non. And I don't know what to make of Khalil Herbert in terms of what's going to happen this week, because last week it was basically 2 drives for David Montgomery, 1 drive for Khalil Herbert. When Justin Fields really kind of started going, Herbert was in the game. They drove down to the red zone. They didn't bring Montgomery in. It was Herbert's drive. But Montgomery still played 66% of the snaps. If he's going to play 66% of the snaps and he's going to have a 20% target share, I think he's probably still going to be okay in PPR.
There's an interesting wrinkle here for the Bears that they haven't had in the past in their matchups against the Packers. Their new offensive coordinator was on the Packers last year. So who better to know this defense than Luke Getsy, their play caller? And if he thinks that Khalil Herbert is a better fit for their offense against this defense, then I think you're going to see more of Khalil Herbert. I agree with you, Jamie. I don't feel good starting David Montgomery, and it stinks because I took him with a top 40 pick, and I want to use him. But if I've got another running back, Darrell Henderson's an easy one to start ahead of him. I've got to go in a different direction than Montgomery if I can do it. I'm not ready to say that I'll start Herbert ahead of Montgomery.
No.
But I'm worried that Luke Getsy might. And by the time he makes that decision, if I don't have Herbert on my team, I'm going to regret it.
But you are starting ETN over Montgomery.
I am starting ETN. No, actually, in full PPR, I'll take ETN, yes.
Okay. See, and I can't get there with, they had the same number of targets last week. Montgomery had 13 more carries, and I don't feel any more confident that ETN's going to gain playing time than Montgomery is over last week.
Yeah, and that's a fair argument. I just look, let's go to your sits, Dave, here, and the guys that you're trying to avoid. And we're going to talk about one that we differ on, but we'll start with Chase Edmonds. That's the first guy on your list. You got Edmonds, Rashad Penny, Allen Robinson, Rashad Bateman, and Dawson Knox. Edmonds taking on a Ravens defense. What's your concern there based on what the Jets running backs did last week?
I just think that the Jets running back succeeded because Joe Flacco was afraid to get hit, and he checked down like crazy. And I don't know if that's going to be part
Tua
of the
wants
game
to get
plan.
hit.
Tua doesn't want to get hit, but Tua's got other guys that he can throw short to in Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and he did last week. And I'm just a little bit nervous that he won't target Chase Edmonds 19 times like Joe Flacco targeted his running backs. He's decent in PPR. I'd flex him, but I don't expect him to have a great game. And he was terrible as a rusher last week. That offensive line part of the problem.
Yeah, the offensive line is a big problem, and I don't know if he'll have much more success on the ground. I do think he's probably going to see a couple more targets because they were playing a Patriots team that just could not score. There was no reason for Tua to have to throw that much. I would expect more pass volume, more target volume for Edmonds. He's a borderline number 2 running back.
For me, it's totally a format thing because in non-PPR, I wouldn't even touch Chase Edmonds, but in PPR, I do think he is in the flex conversation, even a borderline starter as well. All right, let's talk about Allen Robinson, Dave, because you don't like him this week, and it's understandable based on what happened last week. But you hear that noise? It's that squeaky wheel. Sean McVay was talking up Allen Robinson, and you know when Sean McVay talks up a player, that player tends to deliver. I think Allen Robinson's in for a big game this week against the Falcons. What's your concern?
Man, I hope you're right. I hated what I saw from him last week, and it wasn't just the target issue. It was that he wasn't fast downfield. He wasn't explosive. By the time he was separating from coverage, Matthew Stafford was under siege. That offensive line didn't do a good enough job protecting him.
It's a different defense, though.
It is a very different defense, and I am hoping that results in more targets for Allen Robinson. I don't think he's going to have one catch for however many yards, like 12 yards. I don't think he's going to have that. But he could very easily have a 5 for 50 type game. If he doesn't score, I think he's going to leave you a little bit disappointed. That's why he's more of a flex than the other two.
Heath, break the tie. Pro Allen Robinson, anti-Allen Robinson. You're basically right in the middle.
I was right in the middle, so I think I would start CeeDee Lamb over Allen Robinson, but I think I'm probably starting Allen Robinson if I have him. He's in that borderline number 2 range. Either you're starting him as a number 3 wide receiver or you're starting him as a flex. I do think he's going like 5 for 50 and he scores a touchdown. That's great. Wouldn't be surprised if he's a little better than that.
Let's say T. Higgins is out. Tyler Boyd or Allen Robinson?
Easily Allen Robinson. I'm just not that excited about Tyler Boyd even without T. Higgins.
I'll take Boyd.
Yeah, no, Allen Robinson easily for me. I think he's good. Like I said, I think it's a big smash game for the Rams coming off that loss against this defense, traveling across the country, coming off their disappointing loss. Could be an interesting game there. Hopefully Allen Robinson does deliver. All right, Heath, let's look at your sits here for this week. You got Travis Etienne, Devin Singletary as the running backs that you're avoiding, Elijah Moore, Devonte Smith, and Cole Kmet as the guys you're trying to get away from. Elijah Moore, disappointing week 1, going to be disappointing again in week 2?
I think this whole offense looks disappointing right now because of the way they're distributing the football. The leading target getters were Breece Hall, Michael Carter, and Corey Davis. Corey Davis is still playing a big role, and it's not like that could be okay if Garrett Wilson wasn't a thing, but Garrett Wilson was right behind Elijah Moore. They're not going to throw the ball 59 times. So if let's say they throw it 40, then we're looking at 5 or 6 targets for all of these guys, probably against a worse matchup. I don't feel comfortable really starting any Jets. Michael Carter would be my favorite.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I'm a little bit too high on Elijah Moore. It's just one of those situations where I'm hoping. I'm hoping what we saw from Joe Flacco and Elijah Moore in the 2 games that they played together last year carries over to this week, and maybe a situation where some of those 58 passes, where we threw, go to a little bit more in Elijah Moore's direction. But I understand your sentiment there. Devonte Smith, though, I'm curious about because there's that sound again. Nick Sirianni was talking up Devonte Smith, getting him more involved, and this is a matchup where I think we're going to see back and forth, high-scoring affair. As a number 3 receiver, would you consider Devonte Smith, or not even in that regard?
He's a. If you're in a 3 wide receiver league and you start a flex, then I might start Devonte Smith. But even if they want to get these other guys more involved, I expect that he's going to be behind Dallas Goedert as well. I think it's A.J. Brown, then Dallas Goedert, then Devonte Smith. Maybe he goes from 4 targets up to 6. He's not going to give you a goose egg, that's for sure, I hope. But he might still be in the 3-catch, 40-yard range.
The Vikings allowed a 75% catch rate to wide receivers last week, and that includes Christian Watson's drop. If Devonte Smith has that play this week, he's catching that ball and he's taking it to the house.
I feel like a big game's coming. I really do. I feel like I got him too. I'm going to switch him and Elijah Moore. I think Elijah Moore's in a worse spot, and Devonte Smith's in a better spot.